West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
One of the other jaw-dropping revelations in these transcripts is the plan to fire Gina Haspel. I want to read this to all of you, and then we'll dive into it. Alyssa Farah told the committee that Kash Patel was the CIA director for about 14 minutes. It has an echo to the coup guy at DOJ, Mr. Clark, being the Attorney General for a little longer than that. This is the transcript from Alyssa Farah, quote, "I will share one thing that I cannot confirm myself, but it's worth looking into. I've been told that they tried to fire Gina Haspel, the CIA director, and install Kash Patel. But Gina, who's a very savvy operator and an incredible public servant, already had what I call a suicide pact in place, where basically the entire intelligence community would walk with her if that happened, officially, or essentially decapitating the entire intelligence community. So they were able to stop it. But allegedly, for about 14 minutes, Kash was actually the CIA director. And I don't need to tell this to Congressman Schiff, but that man has no business being anywhere near intelligence or anything else. So all that is to say, it was a scary period, and I'm glad I wasn't there for a lot of it. But I think you guys have a lot of threads you should pull. So, Luke, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Kash Patel is now an immunized, has some limited immunity, and a witness as a witness in the investigation into the mishandling of classified documents at Mar-a-Lago. He was, for 14 minutes, the country's CIA director.
Right. Yeah, you're correct about his role also in the Mar-a-Lago case. And I think there are a lot of echoes here of what happened at the Justice Department, where there was another plan in place to install Jeffrey Clark atop the Justice Department, another Trump loyalist. But again, there was a threat of a mass resignation within the Justice Department and terrible headlines and embarrassment for the Trump administration. And Donald Trump at the end did not go along with this, and apparently he did not go along with this plan with Kash Patel either. And I think if you combine this with the transcript from Johnny McEntee a little earlier in the week, it shows how there was sort of a loyalty test about who would go along with Trump to the farthest late as to who could stay in office, because there were several people that were referenced by Mr. McEntee as having been dismissed when they were seen as disloyal. And in fact, there was almost like a loyalty test review of each individual, how loyal they were to Mr. Trump.
You know, Kyle, what is it that you want to do if you want Jeffrey Clark atop DOJ and Kash Patel atop the CIA? What is it that he wasn't able to do that he would have realized with the two of them? Do we know the answer to that question?
Well, I think you're talking about two different strands of the sort of conspiracy theory, or the conspiracy, the multi-step plan to kind of subvert the election. And one of those involved foreign intelligence and questions that, the most extreme versions and fringiest conspiracy theories about foreign adversaries changing votes, even foreign allies changing votes. There were, Scott Perry, the congressman, was texting with Mark Meadows about these ideas that the Italians and the Brits were involved with trying to change votes with Gina Haspel as their ally. And these were just totally crazy theories that were being thrown around. And I think you see, how those played out. Trump was exposed to a lot of those and may have taken actions to try to pursue some of those questions. And that may be why he looked at some changes that, in the intelligence world. He looked at those other changes at DOJ. And what we saw really was this resistance by the people who running those agencies that prevented it from happening.
Joyce, we also learned that Chris Krebs was indeed fired because he did his job too well, that he declared publicly that the election was the most secure in America's history.
So going back to Johnny McEntee's transcript, there's this entire theme of loyalty test, of Chris Krebs getting fired because he stood up for elections, of people at DOD who had to go because they didn't believe that Trump was entitled to invoke the Insurrection Act. And really what we see at this point, it feels so much less, Nicole, like telling the story of a presidential administration than it feels like when I used to prosecute organized crime cases, Dixie Mafia cases, where so much effort was expended on trying to keep the truth from coming to light. So much energy was expended on getting people to obscure the truth when they testified so that no one could be held accountable. And now we're beginning to see some real holes in that armor and some of the truth shining through. And it echoes back to Jim Comey and his earliest comments where he had dinner with Trump, and Trump asked him for his loyalty, not loyalty to the Constitution, but personal loyalty. And here at the very end, we see people like Gina Haspel at risk of losing her job because she was loyal to the country and the Constitution, not the president. For anyone who's not getting this point, it's not very subtle at this point in time. Trump was about Trump. Trump was never about America and democracy. I heard Adam Schiff tonight say that he felt like the committee had reached everyone in the American public who was reachable, everyone who could listen to the truth. And hopefully that message continues a little bit further as this evidence continues to come to light.
Joyce, let me just follow up with you, because that act of firing Jim Comey was ultimately investigated by the Mueller probe as one of the acts of obstruction of justice. And I wonder, one of the crimes for which Trump was referred criminally by the committee was obstruction of an official proceeding. Are these acts also part of what will be scrutinized by DOJ as that obstruction?
So I suspect that DOJ, for whatever reason, has moved past the recommendations in the Mueller report. Many of them will be out of the statute of limitations by now. There's a 5-year statute of limitations on prosecuting federal crimes. And perhaps hindsight will view that as a mistake. We know that Merrick Garland is very much an institutionalist, that he wanted to strengthen the Justice Department, that he didn't want to tear the country apart with cries that DOJ was political. And yet, at the end of the day, when we evaluate what the former president did, it cries out for legal accountability. And at every step along the way, we see how he skirts, sometimes very narrowly, legal accountability for his misconduct. And that's really, in many ways, what led us to January 6th. It's past time for Trump to face justice.
It's so interesting. Every time he gets away with something, if you will, he escalates. The day after Mueller testifies, there's the perfect call with Zelensky. He dodges his first impeachment and he starts talking about a rigged election. That election ends and he works on the January 6th coup.
It is Friday, the 30th of December of 2022, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all night hawks in the Diner of Life. Okay, well, we made it to Friday and the end of the year practically. I guess we get to make all the jokes about, hey, see you next year, and we will. because that's only in a couple of days. Oh my God. That went by fast. I love these end-of-year Twitter questions or polls where they, and it's always the ambiguous they. Who are they anyway? I don't know. They're just out there. They all are. But they ask, what do you consider your biggest achievement for 2022? And I didn't have anything that I could come up with. What did I do this last year? I went by too fast. Seemed like I had one succession of health issues, mine and my mother's, since I am I am her caregiver. Yeah, caregiver. That's what I am. I give her care, and then of course I've realized, you know what, the body disintegrates. No amount of positive thinking prevents it. It's just the way it is. So, fortunately, I damaged my body in various athletic pursuits early on, and I had to come to terms with, living a life where you're not able to bound buildings in a single bound. Okay. Now, if I said bind buildings, that would mean that I got to wrap it up, if you get my pun. Yeah, it's too early in the morning for that wherever you are. So I'll stop that. So, looks like Trump's taxes have actually been released to the public, and I guess we have to pour over them. We won't. Someone will, and we'll comment on it, because that's what we do. We'll pour over it at some other time, but right now we have some other things in store for you. But they have released them, and be curious to see what's in them, because I was kind of hoping it would be more than 6 years. It should be 30. That's how I would look at it, but that's just me, because I want to know, at what point and what kind of purchases and money laundering techniques were used when he transferred from, the regular New York Italian mafia that his dad, had forged alliances with, to the Russian mafia. And it wasn't just New York. So I just curious on little changes, that were affected during that time. There's always been speculation about Donald Trump being groomed by the Soviet Russian interests way back. I like to remind folks, Ivana's dad was KGB. I'm just saying. Anyway, he did bury her at his golf course in a very, very heavy casket, and ostensibly she was cremated. Now, I don't know how that works. She was Catholic. Okay? They don't cremate in the Catholic religion. Not usually. And still remain a Catholic. I mean, a priest doesn't consecrate the ashes, I'm pretty sure, unless there's some sort of like new guitar mass type that does it. Not to denigrate the guitar mass. They were lovely endeavors, and I don't know. It was appealing, but still, it was also a little kind of funny. Groovy, as we used to say. Groovy. Okay, so what else? Oh my God, it's never ending. Don Jr. Okay, it's not just the taxes, because we also have the troves and troves of transcripts that I apparently need to be released by tomorrow. Because do they get sworn in? Does the repugs take over the House exactly on the 1st, or do they have to wait to the 6th? Just curious. Because, instead of having a coup, we're releasing the evidence of the coup. And as soon as the repugs take over, all that's going to get memory hold. I've heard some rumblings. I'm going off on a little tangent here, which we do in the morning, but we'll tie it all up. I have heard rumblings of the Freedom Caucus, which is just a nice word of calling them seditious insurgents, because that's who the Freedom Caucus is, Jordan et al., are going to pull the purse strings and defund the FBI, the DOJ. Can they do that? I'm not sure. But that's the game they play. Used to be that a criminal probe took its own course independent of whoever the administration happened to be. A crime was a crime. Or maybe that was just my romantic notion of what happened all these years. Why is it with this guy everything has to be different and we have to pretend it's the norm, and that what came before was some sort of quaint, appeasement to liberal reason? Now, if that isn't Nazism and fascism, I don't know what is, because that's one of the main definitions of it. It is. All right, so I got a bit busy, so I couldn't listen to all of David's show while I was working and whatnot. But apparently, like I said, I didn't listen to the whole thing, so I didn't get the whole resolution. But apparently, the pizza box in the Pizza Tate Gate did not implicate Tate. That was just, just some sort of coincidence. Convenient? I don't know. But apparently that's not the case. And it was nice thinking that it was, though, I have to admit. Oh, wow, he publicized his assassination coordinates. On the other hand, I guess it, gives the lie to the whole idea of assassination coordinates anyway. So, And Elon should take note. I saw that there was some advice from a psychotherapist or neuroscientist or somebody who says that Elon Musk needs LSD therapy. Yeah. I would suggest giving him LSD and then waterboarding him and see how he likes it. See if he comes to any kind of epiphany. Nah, that would be terrible. I might stay with him for a little bit longer than is necessary. But I'm telling you, this guy is on track for pulling a Howard Hughes with, removing himself from, proper society, growing his fingernails long, and becoming a recluse. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe. I would actually prefer it, but that's just the narrative I would like to see constructed. And we'll see if it bears fruit. We'll see. Anyway, LSD therapy, it might work. I don't know. Does LSD, by its notion or its use in therapy, would it impart empathy, possibly? I mean, make people better people? Maybe. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to go all Scientology and say, this is like bullshit. This is the kind of stuff that psychiatry wants to make a brave new world over. I don't know if Scientology necessarily would come to that, but they do hate, the whole psychiatry industry. Is that what it is? An industry? I don't know. I only mention the Scientology because there seems to be a lot of Scientology going on in Florida. And I'd be careful. I'm just saying. Now, I don't want to offend any Scientologists out there, that might be friends. But I don't know. I've seen what Musgrave has told everybody that they have to do, so I'm just saying. You're either part of the family or you're not part of the family. You're either clear or you're not clear. You're either on a Thetan level or you're not on a Thetan level. All right. All started from, science fiction writing. When I was, let me just say a little bit about L. Ron Hubbard real quick here. When we were growing up in Southern California, there was a scandal about him going around selling futures to build a spaceship to take people to Venus. and was sort of like putting on the Roman collar and eliciting donations door to door that got Lenny Bruce busted. Under the guise of being a priest, he was, getting tithings. And that's, fraud. It's illegal. It's bunco. And L. Ron Hubbard was doing a similar thing. And somebody said, well, I'd like to be able to see the spaceship you're building. And he could never present the spaceship because he was never building a spaceship. He was just collecting the monies. But you bring that up and it's like memory hold. No one remembers this anymore or knows about it or anything. I guess what I could do is go back and find the newspaper articles that spoke about it, but it's not so easy, which is interesting. So I'm just saying, old L. Ron Hubbard, back in the late 50s and early 60s, was eliciting donations to build a spaceship to Venus. Like, that's the place we all want to go. I don't know. Tell Elon that that's where he should send his, he should go. Go to Venus. Yeah, I don't know. I guess compared to Venus, Mars is a paradise. I would not go to Mars. It has no magnetosphere there. All those cosmic rays that strip the atmosphere and its oceans and water. Please. That's where you want to go? We're going to move underground. Well, you could move underground here too. All right, I don't know. Let's leave this planet because we're too lazy to take care of it. It may be on a collision course anyway, which we all know it is. I mean, Jesus, the universe is a billiard ball table with more billiard balls than it can hold. Is that true? Now, maybe that comparison's wrong. The universe holds everything, so it's always able to hold everything. But there's a lot of it when you think about it, even when the spaces between seem insurmountable to us. Where are we going with this? Well, it's going to be a new year, and so we're just, going a little crazy at the end of it. Alrighty, tough time of year for me. I'm not going to get into it. You know what it is, and so we'll probably deal with it on Monday. And yes, we will have a show on Monday. That will be the second. Well, is that true? Yeah, it's the second. Sunday's the first this year. Wow. Anyway, what do we have in store for you here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy as we begin here at the end of the year, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays? Yes, the threat of mass resignations from the intel community upended Trump's coup plans. I think that he would have liked it because he was working for Vlad. But cooler heads prevailed, fortunately. On the rest of the menu, an Idaho school board won't say what are the racist incidents it is investigating at its middle and high schools. It's a lot of itses. The US Census Bureau has redefined the meaning of urban America, and the new year is expected to bring more changes to state voting laws. After the break, we move to the chef's table where a court in Dubai approved the extradition to Denmark of a British financier accused of orchestrating a $1.7 billion tax fraud scheme. And the Turkish, Syrian, and Russian defense chiefs held surprise talks in Moscow. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly, and Happy New Year. To the left of that chat room link across the page, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon page. And do please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. If you could send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink, I know you've heard this for years, but if you could afford that to send it to us once a month, that helps us pay our bills, and that really helps. So thank you for your generosity, and to those of you who have done so, and thank you to your generosity to those of you who might do so in the future. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter as we make our transition apparently to Mastodon, you can do so by following Netroots Radio at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that and the Mastodon account too. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam, and I will make a Mastodon account in the beginning of this coming year. I promise. Like I promised I was going to tie up all that meandering beginning of this show. Did I? Well, I got into the curated upcoming events part, so that kind of tied it up. But anyway, I will make a Mastodon account, but do follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. Mostly because I post, not for my constant barrage of pithy comments, but because I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Kos 10 minutes before showtime. And that's where you can find the full articles by the actual reporters who wrote them, indeed. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and please, please, please pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. Okay, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy on this fine Blue Moon Spirits Fridays is, I got to scroll back up here. It is from the Idaho Mountain Express by Mike Schultz, who is an Express staff writer there. The Blaine County School District is seeking more information on reports of ongoing racist incidents at Wood River Middle School and Wood River High School. The allegations, which district officials would not elaborate on, prompted more than 24 community members, you mean parents, to write letters to the school board prior to its December meeting last week. Those letters outlined accusations of discrimination against Black and Latino students at the two schools. As a community member, I believe that all students have the right to a safe and supporting learning environment in our schools, Chairman Keith Rourke said, quoting from one such letter. Discrimination of any kind should not be tolerated. I am aware that there are ongoing racist and harmful incidents occurring at our schools, and that racist actions towards Black and brown students are sometimes unaddressed by Blaine County school staff. This is referring specifically to Wood River Middle School and Wood River High. And that was part of the letter. The board stated that these actions are taken seriously by the district. During the December 13 meeting, Rourke said that the board must get the facts straight to avoid jumping to speculative conclusions. They always say that when they try to avoid the fact that they have racist incidents happening at their schools. And apparently in white paradise, if you talk to the right people. They're all white, by the way. Some of the concerns here are very legitimate, Rourke said. There are concerns that all of us share. There has been some misinformation that has been circulated. I don't know where it originated, but I think it's important for us to take this up and have a full report so we know what the facts really are in these two schools. Misinformation. I don't know. I think Mr. Rourke here needs to be on a very short leash. Now, Rourke assured the board that steps are being taken to address these incidents and thanked the public for their organized letter campaign to the board. Yeah, he thanked them. Steps were already being taken prior to receiving these letters that occurred in a period of about 48 hours last week, Rourke said. I'm encouraged that we have so many people who are concerned about these kinds of issues, but I do believe it's critically important to separate fact from assumption or speculation, and it's also important to provide the public of overview the plans that the board has to address these issues. Oh, they're going to bury it in bureaucracy like they always do. According to the board, Assistant Superintendent Adam Johnson has a close relationship with Wasmuth Center for Human Rights in Boise, and arrangements are being made with the center to investigate the issue. The board plans to take up the subject again once the matter is investigated. I just want the public to know that these matters are not going unaddressed, Rourke said. We want to act on what we know and can't establish as fact, but we are committed to the principle that all students have a right to a safe and supporting learning environment. Now, according to Rourke, Principal Rob Ditch at Wood River Middle School held listening sessions for families to share their concerns and eventually plans to hold a permanent group that can provide feedback to staff and families. The board says they will reconvene in January to address the incidents and say they will provide ample time for the investigation to reveal the facts. The board plans to give a full incident report at the next board meeting, slated for next month. Mike Snyder from the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. More than 1,100 cities, towns, and villages in the U.S. lost their status as urban areas yesterday, Thursday, as the U.S. Census Bureau released a new list of places considered urban based on revised criteria. Around 4.2 million residents living in 1,140 small cities, hamlets, towns, and villages that lost their urban designation were bumped into the rural category. The new criteria raised the population threshold from 2,500 to 5,000 people, and housing units were added to the definition. The change matters because rural and urban areas often qualify for different types of federal funding for transportation, housing, health care, education, and agriculture. The federal government does not have a standard definition of urban or rural, but the Census Bureau's definition often provides a baseline. The whole thing about urban and rural is all about the money, said Mary Craigle, Bureau Chief of Montana's Research and Information Services. Places that qualify as urban are eligible for transportation dollars that rural areas are not. But then, rural areas are eligible for dollars that urban areas are not. The Census Bureau this year made the biggest modification in decades to the definition of an urban area. The Bureau adjusts the definition every decade after a census to address any changes or needs to policymakers and researchers. The Bureau says it is done for statistical purposes, and it has no control over how government agencies use the definitions to distribute funding. There were about 2,646 urban areas in the mainland U.S., Puerto Rico, and U.S. islands on the new list released yesterday. Among them were 36 new urban areas that were rural a decade ago. Under the old criteria, an urbanized area needed to have at least 50,000 residents. An urban cluster was defined as having at least 2,500 people, a threshold that had been around since 1910. Under this definition, almost 81% of the U.S. was urban and 19% was rural over the past decade. Under the new definition hammered out after the 2020 census, the minimum population required for an area to be considered urban doubled to 5,000 people. Originally, the Census Bureau proposed raising the threshold to 10,000 people, but pulled back amid opposition. The new criteria for urban areas shift the urban-rural ratio slightly to 79.6% and 20.4%, respectively. In 1910, a town with 2,500 residents had a lot more goods and services than a town that size does today, and these new definitions acknowledge that, said Michael Klein, North Carolina's state demographer. With the new criteria, the distinction between an urbanized area and an urban cluster has been eliminated since the Census Bureau determined there was little difference in economic activities between communities larger and smaller than 50,000 residents. Of the 50 states, California was the most urban, with 94.2% of its population living in an urban area, while Vermont was the most rural, with almost 65% of its population residing in rural areas. For the first time, the Census Bureau is adding housing units to the definition of an urban area. A place can be considered urban if it has at least 2,000 housing units, based on the calculation that the average household has 2.5 people. And among the beneficiaries of using housing instead of people are resort towns and ski or beach destinations, or other places with lots of vacation homes, since they can qualify as urban based on the number of homes instead of full-time residents. Nicholas Riccardi and Acacia Coronado of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. State lawmakers around the country introduced thousands of bills to change the way elections are run after Donald Trump falsely blamed his 2020 loss on voter fraud. Hundreds become law. Even with proponents of Trump's election lies roundly defeated during this year's midterms, advocates on both sides of the voting debate are bracing for another round of election-related legislation. Republicans are eager to tighten election rules further, while Democrats, who took control of 2 additional state houses, will seek to make it easier to cast a ballot. Don't make it sound like it's a bad thing, okay? Please? Back to the article. Minnesota's newly directed Democratic Secretary of State, Steve Simon, said he had spoken to several secretaries of state who are eager to push for changes in voting. Losses by election-denying candidates in top races have emboldened some Democrats to champion expansion of voting rights. Democrats won majorities in both houses of the Minnesota legislature in November, giving Simon a good shot at enacting changes. He expects to urge lawmakers to adopt automatic voter registration and allow high school students to pre-register. States routinely make adjustments in their voting laws, some subtle, some dramatic. But experts have never seen an explosion of legislation like that which followed the 2020 presidential election. With more than 3,600 election bills were introduced, according to the Voting Rights Lab, which tracks legislation. Liz Avor, senior advisor to the group, said 22 states in the last couple of years expanded access to the ballot, 10 created new restrictions, and 5 expanded access in some ways while creating new barriers in others. This, she said, has created a divide in the U.S. in which your zip code determines your access to our democracy. Go ahead and read the rest of the article. You can find it at the show notes and links diary I have posted at Daily Co's, so do. All right, let us now get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, making a splash. You just know that Hollywood financier and producer ranks have a checklist for what to look for when deciding whether or not to back a project. A story that's not too convoluted, family values are nice, tech and violence, and extra credit for hints of spirituality, environmentalism, and lately, politically correct bashing of the military-industrial complex. The new Avatar, The Way of Water, gets checks on all these, plus a big one for production values, which is about the only area where this 3-hour epic really shines. In fact, years of production delays were caused by the development time needed for the new underwater motion capture technology that the film uses. It works, though, especially when added to the rest of the cinematography and CGI. Director James Cameron's first Avatar movie back in 2009 introduced us to Pandora and its blue inhabitants, the Na'vi, who are being assailed by evil Earthers needing to colonize a new planet following the ruination of their own. As you know, if you saw the first one, that didn't work out, but you also knew that the Earthers could return, and now they have. The same Na'vi clan at the center of the narrative of the first are back, this time forced to flee to a coastal area and throw in with the natives there, who were at first reluctant to get involved in the fight, but soon come around, joining in the action mostly in and around, like it says in the title, The Water. An A-list of actors, none of whom you'll recognize, of course, do their best with Avatar, The Way of Water, and furthering the elusive and ambitious universe creation that Cameron clearly has in mind for the series. Intellectual goals aside, though, it's a dazzling and immersive ride, even if not much substance is added from the first. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
I'm probably okay to have one more drink before I drive home. I'm probably okay. I open the window to stay alert. Probably okay. I just popped some gum in my mouth.
Step out of the car, please.
I probably made a mistake.
Probably okay isn't okay when it comes to drinking and driving. If you see a warning sign, stop and call a cab, a car, or a friend. Buzzed driving is drunk driving. A message brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
This is an important message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. When it snows this winter, make sure you clear more than your driveway. Before you hit the road and before you get in the driver's seat, check to be sure that your vehicle's tailpipe is clear of snow. If the tailpipe is blocked, carbon monoxide, an odorless, colorless, and deadly gas produced by your engine can build up quickly inside your vehicle, poisoning anyone inside. To learn more, call 1-800-CDC-INFO. That's 1-800-232-4636.
1 in 6 Americans get sick from eating contaminated food each year. Contamination caused by salmonella is especially common. It's sometimes found in poultry, eggs, ground beef, pork, and even peanut butter. To reduce your risk from this and other foodborne germs, remember to clean, separate, cook, and chill. Clean your hands with soap and water. Separate raw meat, poultry, and seafood from other foods. Wash counters, cutting boards, and utensils before and after using them. Cook all food thoroughly and use a food thermometer to make sure food is cooked. Promptly chill meat, poultry, eggs, and other perishables. Finally, don't prepare food for others if you're sick, and be extra careful when you prepare food for children, pregnant women, the elderly, or people in poor health. To learn more about making food safer to eat, visit www.cdc.gov/vital signs.
Wouldn't it be great if life came with a remote control? You know, you could hit pause when you needed to, or hit rewind, like that time you knocked down that wasp's nest. Uh-oh. Well, life doesn't always give you time to change the outcome, but prediabetes does. With early diagnosis and a few healthy changes, you can stop prediabetes before it leads to type 2 diabetes. To learn your risk, take the 1-minute test today at doihaveprediabetes.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and its prediabetes awareness partners.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
James Whitey Bulger, an organized crime kingpin in Boston for decades, extorted, tortured, and murdered people.
I'm criminal defense attorney Luke Ryan, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
After an FBI agent gave Bulger a heads up about his imminent indictment in 1994, Bulger skipped town and lived on the lam until his arrest in 2011, after which he was tried, convicted, and sentenced to 2 life terms plus 5 years. Bulger's FBI handler helped him because Bulger also was an FBI informant. And in prison, informants can be in deep trouble. Indeed, when Bulger was transferred to the Hazleton, West Virginia Penitentiary in 2018, where known enemies of his were doing time, inmates placed bets on how long he would survive, which wasn't long. Within hours of his arrival, he was bludgeoned to death. The recent Inspector General's report says that Bulger, who is a frail 89-year-old in a wheelchair, should never have been transferred to that prison and never placed in general population there. Never, not even close. Prison authorities knew that Bulger, an obviously in many ways atypical inmate, would receive enormous publicity if something happened to him. Which raises the bigger question: how much attention do we pay to the safety and health of the not famous more than 2 million people locked up in American prisons and jails today?
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because, as the criminal legal system proves every day, freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1899. That was the day that a group of 33 railway clerks gathered in the back room of Barron's Cigar Shop in Sedalia, Missouri. They called themselves the Order of Railway Clerks in America. They affiliated with the American Federation of Labor. Later, the union reorganized as the Brotherhood of Railway Clerks. According to J.F. Riley, one of the men who attended that inaugural meeting, the object of the meeting was to discuss plans against further reduction in salaries and for their general good and welfare. Local clerks had earlier formed what Riley called a crude organization, but they made little progress in improving their working conditions. That was when they decided to reach out to clerks in other cities. They sent out circulars through the mail to try and drum up interest in the union. Riley described the work as slow and arduous. The men had to carry on their union organizing when they were not on the clock. There was no money to pay any of those working to build the union. Despite these difficulties, the union began to grow. A second local was formed in St. Louis, a third in Little Rock, Arkansas, and then a fourth in Kansas City, Missouri. Railroad organizing was often very difficult because owners stood firm firmly against unionization efforts. Today, the Brotherhood is now one of many that have merged to form the Transportation Communication International Union. All along the history of our roads, rails, and skyways, there are many similar stories of workers banding together for a better future. The workers who keep the United States moving remain an important sector of the modern labor movement. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, because there's lots more of us where we come from, where it is currently 44 degrees Fahrenheit, and it even feels like 44 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of about 44 degrees Fahrenheit, about the same as what we had yesterday. We are under quite rainy conditions and will continue throughout the day with such. Reduced visibility from heavy mist at times, and winds are light and variable, and we're expecting over an inch of rain today. Cloudy with periods of rain this evening, expecting even more mist and even more reduced visibility at times. Lows in the upper 30s, low 40s, winds light and variable. And that period of rain until tomorrow is expected to bring with it about 3/4 to an inch of rain. And then cloudy skies early tomorrow will become partly cloudy later in the day, and expect more mist and reduced visibility at times, high in the mid-40s, winds light and variable. And then on New Year's Day, we're expecting to have about an inch and a half of rain for the day and the evening. Oh, my. All right. It looks like pollen is still rated as none here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the Rogue River Valley region is in the good range at 20 parts per million, and the wintertime UV index is in the low range at level 1. Barometric pressure is, it's falling at 29.75 inches. Visibility is down to 2 miles, and relative humidity is at 100%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world. London is 55 degrees and cloudy with a flood watch. Paris is 58 degrees and cloudy with an active wind advisory. Kyiv is 40 degrees and cloudy. Kabul is 25 degrees and clear. Hong Kong is 56 and fair. Tokyo is 40 degrees and clear. Sydney, Australia is 68 degrees and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 57 cloudy with a flood watch. And New York is 52 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Associated Press staff brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. A court in Dubai yesterday, Thursday, approved the extradition to Denmark of a British financier accused of orchestrating a $1.7 billion tax scheme. Hedge fund trader Sanjay Shah is accused of masterminding a scheme that ran from 2012 to 2015, in which foreign businesses pretended to own shares in Danish companies and claim tax refunds for which they were not eligible. The Dubai government's media office said documents show his involvement in fraud and money laundering. Shah was arrested in Dubai earlier this year following a request from Danish authorities. Dubai's Attorney General had appealed a ruling in September that rejected his extradition. In a separate ruling that month, Shah was ordered to pay $1.25 billion to Denmark's tax authority as part of a civil case in Dubai. His lawyers are appealing that judgment. Shah's attorney said he was disappointed with the latest extradition ruling and would launch an appeal before the highest court in the United Arab Emirates, where Dubai is located. He said the defense team expects a final verdict from that court in the next 2 months. The 52-year-old financier has maintained his innocence in interviews with journalists, but never appeared in Denmark to answer accusations. His defense has argued in closed-door hearings that Denmark did not follow the procedures laid out in international extradition treaties. Denmark welcomed the ruling as a great victory. It has required a sustained effort from Danish diplomacy to reach this point and constructive cooperation with the Emirati authorities. Danish Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen told Danish broadcaster DR, "Hopefully today we have come a big step closer to bringing Sanjay Shah to justice in this extortion case." Shah's lifestyle and Dubai's luxurious palm-shaped island over the past few years had sparked outrage in Denmark after Danish authorities signed an extradition agreement with the UAE. Dubai police arrested Shah in June. Shah is just one of several suspects sought over the tax scheme.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Even more holiday staff at the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. The Turkish, Syrian, and Russian defense ministers have held previously unannounced talks in Moscow. The Turkish, Russian, and defense ministry said it was the first ministerial-level meeting between the rivals Turkey and Syria since the start of the Syrian conflict 11 years ago. A Turkish Defense Ministry statement said the Turkish, Syrian, and Russian intelligence chiefs also attended the talks in Moscow, which it said took place in a positive atmosphere. The discussion focused on the Syrian crisis, the refugee problem, and efforts for a joint struggle against terror organizations present on Syrian territory, the ministry said. It added that the sides would continue to hold trilateral meetings. Russia has long been pressing for reconciliation between Turkey and the Syrian government, Moscow's close ally, which have been standing on opposite sides in Syria's civil war. Turkey-backed rebels trying to oust Syrian President Assad. Damascus, for its part, denounced Turkey's hold over stretches of territory in northern Syria, which were seized in Turkish military incursions launched since 2016 to drive Kurdish military groups away from the frontier. Russia's defense ministry confirmed that the three ministers discussed ways to resolve the Syrian crisis, the refugee issue, and to combat extremist groups. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, the week, and the year. But you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on. And we will meet up here on Monday of 2023 for River City Hash Mondays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day, all night, and all weekend, and for the rest of the year for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here on Monday, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte coeur. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.